me organize things here as we discuss lots of things today. It's going to be exciting. So I am very excited. It's a topic that a lot of people are asking about all the time. Um, and in the last few weeks, we've talked about overwhelm, burnout. Today we talk about scaling. Which comes first? Anyway, whilst I get things ready, if you want to give me a thumbs up in the chat, I'll make sure that we are streaming properly before I start diving into things. My name is Nagui Bihelek. I have a few years experience in business consulting, coaching, even software development. So I've worked across many different areas, and I'm going to share some of that experience with you today. So, great. Looks like it's all working. So thank you. And let me get started without further ado. So, as I said, today's topic really, I've kind of switched these around. I know we've posted the overwhelm to control, but really the question and the reason I flipped these around was, which comes first? Scaling? Okay, growing a business, learning to scale, or dealing with the overwhelm and control. Okay, so my belief was that if I approach somebody and I say, how would you like to scale your business? And they are in overwhelm, they're burning out, they're going, bugger off, leave me alone, right? So getting people to have clarity and reach that level where they can think about scaling, I thought would be important. So if you haven't watched the last session on overwhelm and control, do take some time to go over that. I'm just going to do a quick recap. And get my clicker working. Okay, so, small business owners, we struggle with the stress from overwhelm, burnout, all of those things. When you're starting out your business, you're doing so many different things. And it's not about how many hours you are putting in. It's about the effectiveness of those hours, and it's a behavior pattern. It's a thought process, and that's really why we touched on that to reduce that stress level, get into the reduced stress, overwhelm, so you can have clarity, get your head above water. Being busy is not great, right? It reaches a point when it's burnout, it's overwhelm. You can only do that for a period of time before it becomes a challenge. So we are going to talk about scaling today and how you do that to multiply your effectiveness. I know hundreds of times if you want. So depending on what tools you use, and we're going to talk about that. So the overwhelm, just to finish the recap here, it's about the thinking patterns, it's about the behavior actually that results in those stresses and thinking patterns. Okay, so the behavior is really how you get to be overwhelmed and burned out and get out of control. Do you need to ask yourself some of these questions? Do go back and take a look at that. It was 45-minute session last week, so there is lots of info in that. Some tips, okay. Having clarity is important. Many people have really long lists, but they struggle to prioritize, decide where to start. They prefer to be reactive rather than proactive, get the phone ringing, get people calling. That can also cause the overwhelm, the stress, and ultimately the inability to scale. So let's talk about scaling. All right. So scaling without losing control. How do you get your time back to a level where you can actually multiply yourself several times? Think of what you're doing today as, what if I could turn that and show you how to make that into a cookie cutter of your business and processes and systems of what you're doing today, so that you can actually scale it. How do you do that, right? Without losing control. And that's the key, right? We hear this all the time. You grew too quick, you lost control, so what happened? Is it behavior, or is it a mindset? Was it the discipline? What was going on in that scaling journey for some of those organizations? And look, I studied some of those, almost 4 decades ago. I could tell you some horror stories, and the peak at which people reached without losing control, and what happens and why it happens. And I can tell you lots of stories about those things. But the bottom line is, if you're wearing too many hats and you're trying to do a lot of things, you are going to burn out. That's why those two topics are very close together. And you run out of time. You don't have time to scale. So today, I hope to leave you with a framework that you can use to help you get started on this journey, okay? And we're also going to talk about some of those pitfalls that you need to be aware of, be conscious about, so that you can get that time back and manage your ability to scale, okay? Whether you are a coach running a coaching practice and you're working an hour, getting paid for an hour, and it's getting to the point where you've peaked and you don't know how to get past that point, or whether you're a realtor, a plumber, a technician, a dentist. It doesn't matter how you scale, the concepts are going to be the same, right? And yes, it always comes back to the behavior, the mindset, okay? Those two things can't be separated. I've said this many times. We can't read your mind. We can only observe your behavior. So what you think is your problem. What you do becomes our problem, okay? Or our opportunity. So remember that the behavior impacts your values, your beliefs. Your brain is designed to protect you. And it can only do that through the feedback that you get through behavior, interaction with other people. Your trigger response actually feeds your brain. So the behavior is critical, right? I digress. Scaling this, so it's not about doing more. It's actually about doing less in a leverage way. It's not about multitasking. We've had lots and lots of conversations about how, in reality, we can't multitask effectively. We single task and we lose focus and we create more chaos by trying to multitask rather than focus on getting one thing done at a time. So, the opportunity is to get clarity. We'll talk about a process that you can implement so that you can actually scale easily. When I was consulting, as I mentioned a few decades ago in the last millennium, one of the key things that we often talked about was the tetrahedron with 3 points on it. It was money, time, and resources. Okay, well, that's changing a little bit today. So the idea is Depending on the size of the project, if you have enough money and enough resources, you can deliver it on time. But if the money and resources are limited, then time has to stretch to meet those requirements. So those things are still important. But today we have technology, we have all kinds of things that we need to take into consideration that are critical for scaling, for reducing stress and overwhelm. Do you want to scale and burn out in the process, or do you want to scale easily? And that's really the difference. So looking a little bit at the foundation, what we see with a lot of people, a lot of companies, they tend to either shift towards being very tech heavy or very people heavy. And that depends on the focus of the business. Okay, if the focus of the business is product leadership, then it might need to be a little bit more tech heavy. But we're really talking about scaling. When we're talking about scaling, how do you scale and have that balance? Okay, and the idea is before you can scale, you need to look at the process. You need to look at technology today. You need to look at people, and you need to look at yourself. We talked a lot about that in the overwhelm last week. Is where do you fit into the organization? What's your role? Do you have clarity on your role, other people's roles? Are you delegating properly? Are you training properly? All of these things are really part of being able to scale at the right pace, right? If you skip one of these steps, you're going to go into overwhelm and you're going to burn out. You're going to go back to just working by yourself because it was too hard. We've seen that many times. Business owners try to scale and find themselves that they didn't follow the process, the sequence properly, and they just throw their hands up in the air because of the overwhelm, the burnout, and they go, I was making more money, I had more lifestyle, more freedom when I was by myself. I want to go back to just working on my own. It happens all the time. Okay, so we want to break through that by having the discipline and the structure. I'm only going to talk about these three core elements because they are really the foundation of every business. Yes, you've got finance, you've got other things, you've got maybe operations falls into delivery, finance falls into sales, marketing as well. So really, if you just look at these three components of your business, you can scale very effectively. The other stuff support these three functions in business. So marketing is about attracting more leads. Okay, you push stuff out and they come to you, right? Sales could be the other way, where you're reaching to people and you are it's a push-pull concept, right? So in one way, the ads and everything that you do in marketing is meant to get people calling you. And the other way is you reaching out to people. And when they call, you need to convert them, right? So when you qualify them and you get them in the funnel, they need to convert. And very often, and we do this a lot in business coaching, we forget that the most important thing in sales and marketing is conversion. Okay, so measure conversion, measure conversion, measure conversion, right? The delivery side, the measurement is retention. Okay, so the quality of your delivery, the quality of your service is measured through client retention, okay, referrals, all of those things really fall into the quality of your delivery, whether you are manufacturing something and shipping it, or whether you are providing a service, that all falls in your delivery. And I often use the analogy of a manufacturing plant because it doesn't matter if you're doing a service or selling a product or manufacturing, we need to think of the steps of delivery all in the same manner. They are a sequence of things that happen one after the other. Excuse me for a moment. Okay. And that sequence is important in all of those different areas. So discipline is key. So here are the first three questions. This is your audit, if you like, whether you can scale today or not, okay? You need to ask yourself those three questions, and you need to ask them also in reverse. And you need to ask them multiple times. So today, because of technology, we have artificial intelligence, we have workflow automation, we have phone answering systems that can put people through to the right person depending on what you want to do. So there's lots of things that are really need no people intervention, but you need to figure out what that is. So what can you automate? And if you don't know how to answer that question because you don't know what's possible, right? I had this conversation with someone yesterday and they said, well, I don't know what's possible. So that can be a barrier to scaling. So you need to maybe consult with someone, talk to someone. But before you can do that, we'll talk about the steps that you need to do before you can have that conversation. You can't just dive into a conversation with someone about, oh, I need to know what I can automate. Well, I can't help you figure that out if you don't know what you do on a day-to-day basis. Once you've automated some things, there's going to be stuff that's left that really is the stuff that you delegate. And to delegate properly, you need to train people. You can't train them if you haven't got a procedure manual, right? You can't train somebody, you can't delegate something just by saying, hey, can you take over doing this? I want this outcome. You're going to have lots of reiterations, lots of stress probably if you do it that way. But if you follow the process that I'm spelling out today, you can actually scale easily. Then you get to what is it that only I can do? What is it that only I should do? Okay. And if you get to that point, you get to start asking the question in reverse. Okay, I thought this was something that only I should do, but actually maybe I can train somebody and delegate that. So you go back through that loop. Oh, well, if I delegate it to this person, maybe they don't need to do everything. They can just do these pieces if we automate that. Okay. So, I think it was last month, I did a bit of a demo of where people get stuck in this is their ability to shift from, but I do things instinctively. I don't have a process. Well, actually, you do have a process. Your brain must go through a sequence. When something happens, your brain looks up your database just like a computer, and that's why AI is becoming so useful. You can train an AI to do a similar thing if you know what you are doing yourself. So you get triggered, you instantly are looking. You're such a fast computer. super, super, super computer in your brain that is allowing you to respond instantly. Okay. AI is a long way from doing that. So if it needs instant response, yes, you might have to do it. If it doesn't, then we can talk about the delegation or automation. I hope that makes sense. It's kind of clear in my head, but sometimes we dive into too many areas. So let's look at the first one. What can you automate? Well, there's a short list there. You don't need to, boil an ocean, right? You need to just take one piece and see what tools are available. So if you're getting lots of emails every day, and we're all getting such a huge amount of emails because it's just the way the world is changing from phone calls, although we're still getting phone calls. It's shifting to SMS, it's shifting to WhatsApp. And you need to ask yourself the question, well, can I delegate that to someone to clean out my inbox and just give me the stuff that I need to deal with that nobody else can deal with? What is that stuff? And I'll talk about that in a moment. What about your scheduling, your calendar? Could that be automated? Yeah, we've been showing people how to use the chatbot widget on their screen to actually interact with people using AI right there and book a meeting for you without anyone being involved. We demoed this with also the phone just a few weeks back. So when the phone rings, the AI can answer the phone these days and actually not just direct people, but answer their queries, deal with some support issues perhaps, direct them to the right person or book a meeting, right? So you can go through this list, and I'm sure if you ask the question enough times and talk to the right people, they can help you figure out what can be automated. That's the first step, okay? So reduce the amount of physical interaction that's required with every step in your operation. I can talk about these 8 things, obviously, for quite some time. The onboarding process, how much of that should be automated what about your recruiting process? We're launching some AI at the moment that takes the behavior intelligence stuff that we've been doing with AccuMatch and does the whole interview online and processes the AI so that the screening process, the first phase of that, is done automatically for you, and you just sit down and interview the final candidates. How much time and effort is that? That's scaling, right? When we talk about scalability, that's the scalability stuff. You've just gone from, I ran a recruitment staffing company for a while, and it's a lot of work. We had to have half a dozen people just screening all the candidates and so forth and figuring them out, putting them into categories. I had to review them. It's a nightmare, right? Today, we're going to move into a new era where scalability, the next decade, is just going to be amazing, just what you're able to do with less time, okay? So, continuing on. What can you delegate? Okay, so once you've eliminated the stuff that you can automate and you've asked the question, what is it that only I can do? Then the stuff in the middle is what you need to think about who you need to delegate that to. Okay, there is stuff that must be done by a person. Okay, this presentation can only be done by me doing the preparation, putting it together, but I delegate some of the work to the team to help get it out there and invite people, manage the process, update the pages. There's a lot that gets delegated that isn't possible to be automated. Okay. In order to delegate so that you are not frustrated, disappointed, constantly chasing people, you need to think about the process. That's the first stage to educate someone of how you would do it before you can just shift to, okay, you figure it out. You know what I've been doing. You can do a better job. Here's the outcome. I just want to see the result from that. Okay, so you can shift to the clarity of the outcome once you've delegated that, but you've done the onboarding and training to allow somebody to do that. And that can take time, right? But the advantage is when you train people and you do it the right way, you can benefit from that forever. It's scalable, okay? Because one person can then be responsible for training more people and scaling through that. The automation takes care of itself, so you don't need to worry about that. And then you just get down to what is it that only I must do, okay? And be honest. You know, the quote there is really important. The list is actually a lot smaller than what you've been carrying on your shoulders, what you've been putting in your sack that you have to carry around everywhere. You know, we used to have the 1 minute manager, the monkey on your back. Well, you've got several monkeys in a lot of cases, and you need to really ask the question, you know, which ones do I need to hand off to other people? Which ones can be automated? It's still the same loop that you need to ask. And the stuff that you should take care of are really the vision, the culture. You know, I talked earlier, you know, back in the late 80s, early 90s, I did a study of organizations and what's the peak that most of them hit before they lose control, they lose their identity, they lose market share, client retention, and so forth. And it was due to the culture. The faster you grow, the quicker you lose control of the culture. And so that is a behavior, and it's a behavior intelligence component that needs to be mapped and constantly monitored and checked and so forth. But that's your responsibility. You're the driver that maintains that. And so when I talk about that peak that organizations hit before they lose control, it's really about how well they manage the culture. IBM was a great example. When Lou Gerstner started the organization, it was all about the culture, think. And then in the 80s, when computers were launched, we grew so fast, we lost that. And then the recession hit. And even IBM, you know, every major organization around the world had to go through this. They had to clean it and put it back into that focus, that culture. Your direction, that's your job. Having clarity of where we're going, who is your target audience, what's your product, what's your message. You know, you could be chasing all kinds of things and never getting anywhere, because we all know that, you know, trying to do 100 things, you'll be less effective than just doing one thing really well. Quick story, my first business was import and distribution in the computer industry. Well, while everyone was doing all kinds of parts of computers, personal computers and software and CDs and all kinds of things, we focused on one thing: video conferencing and video editing. And that's it. And we captured 40% of the market share because of that clarity and focus. So when we talk about, especially coaches, I'm sure there's other industries like that. I can coach anybody. Well, that's not very helpful, and you're not going to be as effective as if you pick that one clear focus and stuck with it. Okay. Then, there are some relationships that only you should manage. And for when you're scaling, it's going to shift from the initial clients to the bigger clients, and maintaining that relationship is actually important in your client retention, because if you don't maintain some relationships, you're not getting the feedback to allow you to tweak, adjust, improve, pivot, whatever. So you need to stay in touch with the consumer and where you are delivering it. So relationships need to be maintained with some level of seniority. Okay. And we can dive into that, the executive to executive level, the manager to manager level, and so forth. So if you are thinking of working with larger organizations, that's a whole other topic I can get into. But right now, we'll just keep it to what's the steps to get to that level. Right? The very first thing you need to do, I mentioned it earlier, it's very simple. These are the questions that you need to go through. Just take any of those marketing, sales, or delivery and ask these questions. Okay. Whenever you are triggered to do something, what happened? That's the trigger that caused you to then instinctively and dive into doing something. Okay. When? By whom? Okay. And what are the steps? What tools did you use to do that? How did you respond to that? So just go through and document these, because if you don't write it down, you can't really effectively give it to somebody else. When you write it down, we can look at what can be automated. When you draw it out as a flow chart, we can see what can be delegated, what are the steps, what are the outcomes at each step that can be then done to allow you to grow. And some people are great at that, and some people really struggle with that, because I forget who it was, not De Bono, but one of the other experts. I can't think of the name off the top of their head right now, but they identified multiple intelligences that we have. There's some people that are great at mathematics. There are some people that are great with music. And then, there is language, there is the spatial intelligence. So these are really, we all have them. It's just which one's being practiced the most, which ones are you more adept at using. So if you struggle with one of these areas, reach out, talk to someone who's good at that, who can help you ask those questions. Coaches, amazing opportunity for coaches to sit with someone and ask them the questions to help them document their process. The business can only scale when you do that. Okay. And systems don't fix behavior, they expose it, right? What do I mean by that? So when you look at what you do, it's a behavior, okay? Um, and it's only then when you look at documenting the steps that you realize what is the observable behavior that I need to see someone else doing, or the system, the automation needs to do. It's a trigger response, it's an interaction, it's a communication, it's all of those things. And really, it's not a mind read. Okay, you can't read people's minds, you can't do that. It's only a behavior. So we need to know the behaviors, and we can do, we can take it into the AccuMatch system, and we can map now, those behaviors, so that when we are training people or recruiting people, people can learn these things if you know what their current map is and what their future map should be, right? Okay, so if someone is great at procedures but not really good at coming up with them, then this is the gap, and we can show and train people. I mentioned last week that I'm launching my behavior intelligence cookbook, which will have a lot of these tips in there and what to do and how to do that with your clients. Okay, so don't worry about losing control. Don't worry about getting having it perfected before you delegate it. You need to make a start. You don't know how it's going to pan out unless you start doing it. Again, having a conversation with someone a few days ago, it takes 20% of the effort to set up 80% of the work. And the last 20% takes 80% of the effort. Okay. So when you spend your time perfecting something, you're really only increasing something by just a little bit, 20% more is likely to happen. But it's going to take you 80% of your effort to get that last 20%. And when you've done that, the world has changed already because you've spent so much time doing it, and it's no longer valid and effective. We saw that in banking in the early years of the big mainframes. It used to take years to develop software in those days. And when we delivered it, the business had changed so much that it was no longer applicable to those roles. So we've had to accelerate development and change the way we deliver things. So that perfection is really very ineffective. Okay. Why leaders get stuck. Okay. So this is, again, I've talked about these, losing control, right? Oh, I can't really tell them everything because I might lose control. They might take my stuff and go away. You know what? Don't worry about it. If you worry about that, you'll never scale and you never get to grow. You need to trust. And yes, there are going to be people out there that are going to want to steal your ideas, your business, that's going to happen. Forget it. We're all building on top of somebody else's prior work. AI didn't get here instantly, magically. We had mainframes, we had personal computers, we had some spreadsheets, we had algorithms. It's a process. Everything was built on top of something else. Even psychology, neuroscience, behavior science, NLP, all of these things were built on top of prior research, prior work. So get over it. You're going to get surpassed if you hang on to stuff too tightly. Okay. You get stuck if you don't believe that your gut instinct can be replaced by a system and a process. That's going to really get a lot of people stuck. Oh, yeah, but They want me. I'm unique. My business is unique. You don't understand. What I do is up here, right? Okay. All of these things are really stuff that gets in the way of people being able to scale. Okay. So change your habits. Dive into the Acumatch. This is a really good couple of examples. If you take these two leaders, and we talk about, why one scales and the other one stalls, the difference is their behavior, not their mindset. They both wanted to scale. They both had great intentions, but they didn't know. One didn't know what to do, and the other one did. And they did it, and they executed it, and they scaled quite quickly. So the difference isn't about what the process is to scale, it's about the mindset and the behavior of actually getting out of that. And the way to do that is self-awareness. And as you know, the best way to become self-aware at a more detailed level than just you're an innovator, that doesn't really help you. You need to know what is the behavior that is observable, that relates to seeing someone as an innovator, because you can't read their mind, you don't know how they think, but you can get a very quick insight. If you map those behaviors, we can draw it back to what this person is really like. So knowing yourself and knowing your mindset through your observable behavior, your actions, is really critical. Okay. Why? Because one was able to delegate. They communicated, they supported people, they put the effort into people as opposed to pushing back and saying, this is driving me crazy, they'll never get it, they'll never understand it. Well, you're not following the process the right way. Okay. If you keep jumping in and fixing things, you are not educating someone to be able to do it on their own. Okay. So, momentum is important because it's the short wins, the little wins, the dopamine hits that excite you to do more of the same. And that's how you get momentum. So you just need to pick one thing, and I talked about this in the overwhelm burnout. Just one thing. If you just do one thing every week and you complete that, that's 52 systems potentially that you could do in a year, right? Okay. Even if you had one per month, that's 12 systems. How many systems could you possibly have in your business? If 12 doesn't handle the majority of your business, you need to rethink about what your business is, and maybe you don't have clarity of focus, maybe there's something in the way, but you should be able to take 12 months and get your business ready to scale. That's pretty fast. Okay. Look at these stats, they're important, right? If I spend an hour with a team member, and even if they are 50% as good as I am, that gives me 20 hours of their time. 40 hours that they would do, I spend 1 hour mentoring, teaching, guiding them. They go away, they do 40 hours. It's not very effective, but it's equivalent to 20 hours of your time. You've just scaled 20 times, right? Automation is infinite, right? If I have the AI answering the phone, it can handle hundreds of calls all at the same time. If you need to scale beyond that, you get more numbers, you just implement more servers, and it can grow forever. We used to talk about writing a book as something that you write it once and you get it working forever. Well, the same with processes and systems, right? If you document it, you can have it repeated many times. You can figure out what to automate. And what you do is the 1 hour. So, when I said earlier, the list is much smaller than you think. Your freedom is just around the corner, okay? Your ability to scale without stress and burnout is really just around the corner, okay? So, what to watch out for? Bottlenecks, okay? So I talked about how companies hit a ceiling and they can't get past it is because they miss the ability to spot the bottlenecks. Okay, bottlenecks could be systems, like I said. If you have a small system handling calls, one phone number, well, it's going to become a bottleneck if that number is already in use, right? So you need to expand that. If you dump a whole bunch of stuff on somebody, right, they will hit their capacity. And remember the tetrahedron I talked about, time, resources, and it used to be money, but think of it that way. If you have limited resources, then time has to stretch, or you need more resources to do that. And if you need more resources, you might need more money. So those three things are pretty important to keep in mind. Don't worry about perfection. What else? So over delegating. You don't track outcomes. You are really trying to micromanage too much. There is a place for micromanagement. You need to manage things well before you delegate them. Otherwise, you are abdicating. Okay, you're dumping stuff because you're offloading it without really thinking about the human element that's involved. And every person, don't call them an employee. They're not an employee. They're a team member. They're a human being. They have needs. There is a reality of the relationship that you have with your team. So, just watching my time, I'm going a bit over today, but this is important. The process I talked about is this, okay? First, you need to define the process. You can't do anything until you've done that, okay? Go back to a few presentations ago when I talked about business intelligence and process, and get your process documented. If you don't know how to do that, you struggle with that, that's the spatial intelligence component. Get somebody to help you with that. Yeah? Engineers are great with that sort of stuff. Technology. You don't know what's out there, what can be automated. Again, you can't do that if you don't know what the process in your business is. Okay? Don't have too many processes. Just take one at a time. Then decide what team members you're going to need. Look at your org chart. We used to do org charts first, projecting what's my business going to look like when it's finished. What's the org chart going to look like? And I caution people today are jumping into that too soon, because this needs to be done first in order to be able to see what roles you need in place to run a business today with the technology that we have today. And the last thing is, what is it that only you can do? So your scaling checklist, okay, it's just one thing at a time. Pick 3 that you're going to do, right? That's probably plenty for most businesses. And start documenting. Automate one thing, delegate one thing, right? Do that 12 times in a year and look back at that year and go, wow, look at how far we have come. Okay, what I've been able to let go, who on your team you rely on, what systems you have in place. Okay, small steps. Scaling doesn't make things easier, it makes things clearer. It's probably a bit of both, right? Okay. So each function, each role gets clarity. You get clarity when you start documenting your systems, when you start putting the processes in place, when you delegate, you automate, you do that. The more honest you are with your own behavior patterns, okay, your behavior is what gets you into trouble. Your behavior is what gets you your results, your success. So if you don't understand your behaviors, you haven't done your AccuMatch or done some behavior intelligence training, you might hit some brick walls in that area, and you'll be less effective than if you deal with your behavior at the same time. All right, so that's it. If you want some help, your call to action, it's up to you. You want to reach out, you want to book a meeting with one of our coaches or with myself, you can reach me at nagi@biqorg.com. All right. So thanks, and do remember to watch some of those other webinars from previous weeks. It all builds, it all adds together. If you've done all of those, I guarantee you that you will have so much knowledge and information that will allow you to go build a successful business and scale it. Okay, it's not just behavior, it's behavior and business practices, right? And that's why I do both. It's not therapy, right? It's about learning what behaviors are getting in the way of us actually putting the business things in place, knowing what business things need to be put in place so that we know what behaviors are going to be required. The two things are tied together. Great. Thank you, and see you next time. We've got some more exciting stuff coming up. Take care.